Good evening, happy weekend, happy Friday. It is Right Blend, and I'm here to talk to you about day 11 of the trial of Pat King. Today we heard from two witnesses. We completed the evidence portion of testimony of Ottawa Police Constable Matthew Bickford, and we also heard the entire testimony from Ottawa, former, now happily retired, but at the time of the Freedom Convoy in 2022, he was the General Manager of Emergency and Protective Services for the City of Ottawa, Kim Ayotte. And under that umbrella includes Ottawa Fire Service, Ottawa Paramedic Service, Ottawa Bylaw and Regulatory Services, Ottawa Corporate Security, and the something about the a management group, an emergency management group of some sort. But the corporate security, that's just the hired companies that protect the City of Ottawa buildings like City Hall and other facilities. That's what that is. So everything emergency except fire is how he described his role. So when we began, I was a little bit late into the room, so I missed the rest of the chief examination. Oh, well, like I just tore out. The chief examination that Natasha Calvino had done of Officer Bickford. What I did catch was the Crown Cross, and there were some things said. He said that he made observations of people in trucks with small children, and he used the word occupation. I remember when he used the word occupation in his notes, the defense objected to the word occupation, and said it was up to the judge to make that decision. The judge overruled the objection. Well, he did not maintain the objection by saying that it's what the officer wrote in his notes, so he can explain why he wrote that in his notes. He just said it felt like the city was being occupied. There were trucks parked everywhere. So in that exchange, he also said about the small children. So he described that. So on re-examination, I believe, Natasha Calvino asked him, why did you mention the small, like what was that, what's consideration there? And he said basically if there was going to be an enforcement action, that any action would have to be done with soft hands, with gloves, because of children. So it's a safety concern for them. And he said, he testified he saw newborn babies living in cars with their parents. I assume their parents. He assumed they were their parents, because it's a logical assumption to make. Who knows? But there's little logic in this. Okay, this is not an activity of logic, folks. If you didn't catch my video this morning, I hope you go back and look at it. My big recap video I posted on Facebook and Twitter, not on YouTube, about the situation as it stands. The millions of dollars donated to the Freedom Convoy to be used for legal defense and other purposes that were stolen. The money was stolen, was taken by the government, seized, never to be heard from again, so that all these convoy accused are on their own. They're in the wind. Well, the government has the full, endless resources of the public purse to go after these people until the cows come home. There's no limit to the ends of this. Every case the Crown loses, they appeal. What about the calculation? Is it in the public interest to continue pursuing these people? It doesn't seem to be a calculation the Public Prosecution Service or whoever else is working this is making. It seems to be just to get these people at all costs. And they have high-level, top-level Crown attorneys running appeals for non-violent offenses, for mischief offenses, for low-level people who were convoy accused. It doesn't make any sense. The precedents that they're using to convict people, the Romowski precedents, the party to an offense precedents, where if you were at the convoy, you're guilty. So we're going to present a bunch of evidence of how much people didn't like the convoy. It was too loud. It was too smelly. There was too many idling trucks, whatever. I don't agree with them politically. That's really what it comes down to. And we're going to take that and we're going to say, you were there. Nobody saw you doing X, Y, Z, and the rest of the alphabet, but you were there, so you're guilty. And that's really how we're working this. And it just doesn't seem like justice to me. It really doesn't. Give me a second, folks, to get some water. It's been a long week, a long day. I guess I'll mention briefly that we're back next week, Monday, for more evidence. Tuesday, probably a partial day. And then a break Wednesday and Thursday, and coming back Friday for the closing arguments. It's going to be an early day Friday, full day. Each team, the defense and the Crown, will have half a day each to make their closing submissions, their closing arguments, and then we'll be done with the trial, and then it will be up. Then the decision will come down in some time. But there's lots more to talk to about for today. On Monday, I'll get to that at the end of the video, who we're going to hear from on Monday, and a little bit more about next week. So back to Officer Matthew Bickford. He testified about the children in the cars during the occupation. He testified at one point that there were vehicles on cinder blocks. So Natasha Calvino asked him, those vehicles on cinder blocks, when were they? And he said, well, I was there all the time, so I can't really give you an exact date. And Natasha Calvino asked him, did you see who put those trucks on cinder blocks? He did not. So we don't know who's responsible for that. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to, because you did not personally observe it. How can you say what it was? You can draw assumptions and inferences and implications, but you don't know because you didn't see it. And there was some criticism, some hypocriticism today from the Crown, I think, when it came to an argument they made about Kim Ayotte and the defense's line of questioning. And we're going to touch on that because it goes to the wider theory of this entire circus and why we are where we are. But so Mr. Bickford also testified that he attended a business owner on Laurier who complained that business was bad and that he didn't like the trucks and so on and so forth. And that's something that he attended to that was in, I guess, the PLT logs or his duty book notes. He was a PLT officer at the time. Brand new officer, well, at the time, relatively green. He started, I believe, in 2019, this particular individual. And so he also testified that he spoke to a business owner in the Byward Market, a restaurant owner, who also didn't like the convoy and who told him that was very frustrated by the convoy and told him that his business was bad, was worse, and that it was. And then Officer Bickford testified that the business was quieter than it was before the pandemic. And this is something that Natasha Calvino tried to open up. I believe that was on Cross that he entered that the Byward Market seemed quieter than it was before the convoy. And Ms. Calvino went into this with him and said, you know what, we were in certain restrictions and lockdowns and stuff. How do you know? And the judge even agreed, like, how would we know which, if the lack of business was due to the fact that the protest was happening alongside the restrictions or because of the restrictions or what? And Ms. Calvino asked him, like, do you go down to Byward Market a lot? Do you have observations of traffic during some of these, being at the peak of restrictions versus when not, versus the convoy and so on and so forward? Maybe it was just somebody who politically disagreed with the protest, didn't like them because they were challenging things that he believes in very deeply and personally. And maybe that's what it was, because the people I know, for every business that complained and so forward, there are businesses who stayed open and who made some of their best business ever. The majors changed too. There's Tim Hortons that was open on Rideau Street, right across from Rideau Center, that did very well. The McDonald's there did very well. 99 Rideau, I believe, was open at the time still, did very well. There was other infamous other places around the core who opened and did some of their best businesses, a lot of different restaurants and such. So these places were dead in Ottawa. Anyone who lives in Ottawa, who went around in Ottawa in 2020, 2021, 2022, it was a ghost town. It was a ghost town. It was a ghost town in winter 2022. It was a ghost town. It was empty. And it wasn't because of the convoy. It was because of the government restrictions. And then Natasha Calvino also put an interesting question to Mr. Bickford concerning that, saying about the convoy and being quiet in the Byward Market. Specifically, she said something really good that I thought was interesting at the time. She said, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to recall. Let me just we'll jump a little bit ahead and see if it comes back to me. But that was the gist of Mr. Bickford's. Oh, no, he said some other things. So he also testified that he was scared when he went to Coventry. It was very scary there. He testified once that he was swarmed, and he testified that to the Crown. And, of course, he also testified about the horns and the smells and everything. The same old thing that we hear all the time. On re-examination, Natasha Calvino asked him about the experience at RCGT Park, Coventry Stadium, baseball stadium, when he was allegedly swarmed, handing out notices or something, and asked him, like, was there any violence done to you? No. Was there any violence done to anyone that you know about? No. Any arrests made? No. None of these things. So it's just hard to put a pulse on all of it and see, the judges being asked to say what happened, what didn't happen, who was responsible for it. This guy never met Pat King. This officer, Constable Bickford, never met Pat King, never interacted with him. I don't know if he said he was aware of him or not. I don't think he said he uses social media. I'm not sure. But he never interacted with him. So same with all the witnesses. I don't think any of the Crown, maybe one or two of the Crown witnesses had brief interactions with Pat King. Minimal defense witnesses had interactions with him at the time. Danny Bulford had two brief ones. And it's just like all this evidence, basically, here's his social media videos, convict him. That's the Crown's case. Here's the social media videos, convict him. But, we're talking about counseling offenses. So somebody brought something up very interesting in the halls of the court. This is counseling. So bring us the people who were counseled by Pat King to do this. Bring us the people who committed these crimes of mischief or mischief not committed. So he's charged with counseling mischief not committed. So we can't find the people. The crime was never committed in that case. I think he's also committed with flat out counseling mischief, though I'd have to recheck the information. But in that case, he counseled somebody, but they never ended up committing the crime. I think Ms. Calvino compared it to a murderer somebody who's trying to hire an assassin who never ends up assassinating anyone. They still tried to hire the assassin. Well, where's the assassin? Where are the people that Pat King counseled to commit crimes not committed, or to commit intimidation, or to commit mischief in general? Who are these people? Where are they? Where are they? They're like ghosts. They don't exist. So that was another interesting point of Mr. Bickford's testimony about the swarming and stuff. I don't know. He said he might have experienced a similar place, something else. But I really want to get to this comment in the byword market, because there was the discussion on the, about the byword being slower, so on and so forth. Oh, I think I'm starting to remember it. Miss Calvino asked him this big golden thing that she asked him. It was good. He was talking about it being slower. She asked him about the days. Does he have direct observations? And, oh yes, she asked him if he was aware if the city or police gave communications to residents to not come to downtown. And he said he wasn't aware. I do believe that there was information from the city or police to not come downtown due to the protest and for store owners to close. But Mr. Bickford Constable Bickford testified that he wasn't aware of it at the time. Again, fresh out of police college 2019-2020, so his entire policing career was during the debacle of the 2020s, so he's got no comparison before that, and he was asked about it and he couldn't. So that testimony, for every person who says they didn't like it, their business sucked, you can find another person who said they loved it and it was good and their business was great. So now we move to Kim Ayotte. He was the high-level official. He was general manager of the City of Ottawa for Emergency Protective Services. He was previously a deputy, the fire chief for Ottawa Fire Services. Then he was in each of the 4 deputy fire roles for Ottawa Fire Services. And before that, he was an operations manager for the provincial fire marshals, I believe. And then before that, a fire investigator. He worked his way up in the provincial government, then got hired for the city to be a deputy fire chief. So whole career in fire services. And we heard a lot of background from him in his evidence in chief with Natasha Calvino about basically how the city works, the acronyms, the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, the EOCMG, the Emergency Operations Center Management Group, which is comprised, I believe, of city managers of all the different departments reporting to the city manager. They come together, they form this, and they do this. Then the NCRCC, which we heard about, especially during Miss Natalie Hanaud's testimony for the Crown a few weeks ago, or whenever last we were sitting. I don't know. I'm losing track. It's all blending together. It's crazy madness, folks. It's crazy madness, and it's every day in court we hear more or less the same thing. I didn't like the convoy. It was loud. It was smelly. It was trucks idling. Throw Pat King in jail. That's every day. Throw Tamara Leach in jail. Throw Chris Barber in jail. Throw this person in jail. But we can't find the people who they counsel. They're mystical creatures. Oh, there's, the Facebook video has 300,000 views. He counseled 300,000 people to commit mischief not committed. Is that where we are now? Is that what it is? Is that what this is? Like, bring these people in. If you hire an assassin to do something, but he doesn't end up doing it, you still hired him to do it. He knows who you are. You know who he is. He's a real person. You're a real person. Who are the people Pat counseled to do these things, to intimidate, to this? This is something that I feel like, am I insane? Or should the Crown have to prove that these people exist? Like, this is a good point. Who are these people? Where's the specific crimes? Okay, you have a video of Pat King saying sound a horn after the 7th injunction or something, maybe on February 8th, or make a noise, or we stuck trucks in onto Kent and stuff. But who are these people he counseled? Go on what he did. And here's the thing. So Kim Ayotte is going through chief, and it's a bit slow, and Natasha Calvino is working him through it. How does the organization work? How does your city work? Basically trying to elicit from him where the failures of the city were. That's, I think, where the defense was coming from. That the city knew that the convoy was coming, knew it was huge, but failed to prevent it, failed to act properly, failed to work in good faith with them. We heard more about that during the good faith agreement. That broke down the infamous one we heard a lot from Tamara and Chris. But at some point, I think it was after the morning break, before he came back in the stand, the Crown rose, and there was a long exchange between the Crown, the defense, and the judge. And another break was called after that, so that Miss Calvino could close. But basically the Crown said, we didn't object so far, but we have a problem with the testimony because we don't see the relevance in it when he's going on and describing these background information and stuff. And they're basically like, I don't see the relevance of it to Pat King. And then the judge basically agreed, said, I don't see what the relevance is to Pat King. But you could look at what the Crown was bringing in when they brought in X, Y, or Z person, X, Y, or Z civilian, to complain about the noise, to complain about the horns, to complain about the idling. You cannot tie that to Pat King. Pat King has a video saying, I want you to honk your horn, and somebody honks their horn. That's not Pat King's fault. Where do you prove that Pat King directed that person, that Pat King was inside of that person's mind? yoking the strings at the control and having them do those actions. I don't even think they coordinated the times. Maybe once the Crown was able to bring an example of a Pat King video at a certain date and time, and then a honking somewhere afterwards. But how can you prove that was him? You have all these people saying they don't know who Pat King is, weren't aware of him during the protest, so on and so forth. And we know that the protest was made of a lot of individual people. So this counseling stuff is pretty weak. It's pretty weak. It is. I mean, it's weak. Who are these people who were counseled? Who are they? Who are they? And how can the Crown go and say that something's not relevant when we have to listen to hours and hours of the smell of horns and the sound of idling trucks and the diesel fumes, no safety equipment for the diesel fumes, That's their whole case. And we listen to it day in and day out, but suddenly it's not relevant when Natasha... And here's the thing, if Miss Calvino had jumped ahead in this and gotten to the brass tacks of where she's going with Mr. Ayotte, the court, they would have a problem with that. They said there's no foundation for that. You don't know what he does at the city. You don't know if that's him or somebody. So she had to build this. It was a lose-lose. No matter how she won it, they would have found a problem with it. So ultimately, I think she did good on her feet in the back and forth with the Crown and the judge during that period. And she said, listen, I'm going to, and the judge didn't outright say, I'm going to forbid you from talking about this. The judge wanted some more focus and specific approach. And Ms. Calvino, highlighted that where they were going with it. And I think one of the defense's strategies is officially induced error, which is basically, okay, there was an act, something happened, it's been proven, more like, I looked this up in a legal dictionary, I'm not a lawyer, but basically, from what I can gather of this officially induced error defense is, somebody committed a crime. It was proven that they were guilty, that they were aware that something was happening, but they received advice from somebody, somewhere, that they acted on in good faith, that is an exception to ignorance of the law is no excuse. It basically absolves them of that, and so that's in pieces, in a not so elegant way where I think this is going. Let's try and wrap this up a little quickly. So yeah, we got through that. Judge didn't throw it out, but I was frustrated by the fact the argument was even made when I can't see the relevance of 95% of what the Crown said. It's just literally like every day we hear the Freedom Convoy is not on trial, but all the evidence we hear is just about the Freedom Convoy. So let's skip ahead a little bit to more of the juicy bits with Kim Ayotte. So we get to the parts in the afternoon when we come back in chief examination. And there was no defense re-examination after Crown Cross. The Crown Cross was like 20 minutes. Well, we get to the part where we're talking about the February 13th deal. So there's this February 13th deal, the good faith agreement made between Freedom Convoy persons like Chris Barber, I think Tom Marazzo was there, maybe Keith Wilson was there, and basically Kim Ayotte was there for the city. I think Steve Kalinakos for the city of Ottawa, city manager, who Kim Ayotte reported to, was there. Other people were there. There was pizza ordered. We heard about this, and it was interesting. Mr. Ayotte testified, who's now happily retired. Good for him. That's the goal of life, is to produce and then to be able to retire. And there's no fault in that. And he seemed very relaxed in that regard, so that's good. It's always nice to see people happy, and we want people to be happy in our country, especially when they work their whole lives and they're good people. Yeah. So this testimony with Mr. Ayotte, where we get to the good faith agreement. One thing that's kind of funny, I'll add this as a humorous thing. He testified that he was asked not to bring a tie to the meeting, I guess to make him more approachable. He testified about the 3 walks he took, and he said that he wore a mask, that he didn't receive any outward aggression from people during those walks, that he submitted an affidavit for the city's injunction and the Justice Watt injunction, which was the city to enable the city to enforce bylaws like no fireworks, no illegal use of streets, noise, whatever, which was separate from the citizens' injunction on the horns, which is a Justice McLean decision, I believe, on February 7th and February 14th, where it was interlocked and extended. So we have these two separate things. So there was a little bit of a kerfuffle trying to find the Justice Watt. They had the Justice Watt decision, but Ms. Calvino was looking for the Justice Watt order, which was the specificity of what was actually ordered to be done in there. Here's the decision. I agree with the city. And Kim Ayotte sworn affidavit for that city injunction, which was, I believe, on the 14th or the 15th. But here's the thing. The good faith agreement, 13th. On the 14th, Barber goes out, moves trucks. Kim Ayotte describes the 14th as a success. We've heard this in the trial of Tamara and Chris. We've heard it now. The 15th, Kim Ayotte wakes up. He thinks, we're going ahead with this. Then all of a sudden, Steve K reaches out to him, says, oh, police say things off. Okay. So then he reaches out to his police contact, who I believe was Staff Sergeant Richard Drummond of the Ottawa Police Service, who tells him, nope, Ottawa Police is no longer moving trucks. So at some point, somebody decided that trucks weren't going to be moved, and that decision was made by the police. The decision was made after the agreement was well underway, after what Mr. Ayotte himself described as a successful day on February 14th of moving the trucks, and so on. And we have a lot of other discussions here, folks, but who obviously Staff Sergeant Drummond didn't make that decision. Who at the police made the decision, and who, if anyone, influenced that person's decision? And I have a very strong feeling that it may have been somebody in the highest echelons of the federal government who was embarrassed and enraged, and maybe his ego was a bit bruised, or very bruised, and he wanted it over now. And he didn't want a good look for the people. And the Crown really, in their cross, they dug into this. They said, with the goal of the city, you would have been so happy if the protesters just left at that good faith agreement. And he said, yeah, that was the goal of the city, was to get them out as quickly as possible. It was always the goal of the city. He said he personally would have liked if they never came, but once they came, he was fine with them staying for 2 days, but his goal would have been for them to leave as quickly as possible. In fact, Kim Ayotte talked about how earlier, before the convoy arrived, there was a discussion where he asked if they could just prevent the trucks from coming into the city, and he was told by legal opinion, no, we can't do that because freedom of mobility. And the Crown pointed out on cross that the city has since learned from the Freedom Convoy that this isn't the case, and that we've seen at subsequent protests where they've now blocked traffic. But what legally changed between the opinion that Kim Ayotte was given when he wanted to close all the exits to save the city a lot of trouble, and now where the city now goes to get another legal opinion that's different? So what changed in the law, in the Constitution, and mobility rights between now and then? I don't know. Because at the time they were told they couldn't do that randomly without having a legal reason before the trucks got to town. But now we can see that they do it all the time. Nonetheless, there was also discussion about the protest permitting system and how most protesters follow the permitting system within the city of Ottawa to get a permit. But of course, they're not legally required to do so. And the permit system also enables police to better manage protests and to get in contact with protest organizers, etc. So there was discussions about those things, about protest permits, about him not wanting people to come into town, about his walks, about other things, he watched the trucks move on the good faith agreement on February 14th. He watched Barber work. He watched it on the CCTV. We still don't know who made that decision for the police. We don't know who influenced that decision for the police. A lot of questions, not a whole lot proven. And here we are on day 11 of this trial and day 38, 7, 9 of the Litch Barber, and then we have so many other ones. The millions of dollars that were given to the convoy should have been used for their defense. It was stolen by the federal government, and now these people are alone. A lot of them can't even afford public defenders. They're representing themselves, and they're getting convicted. And even when they win, the Crown appeals and appeals and appeals until they win with infinite public money. It just seems like a vendetta at this point. It's gross. Good news, though. Pat King had 2 of his conditions varied on consent with the Crown. He no longer has a curfew, and he no longer has random door knocks. Can you imagine? For 2 years, he's had the police coming to his door at random times to check on him. That's a terrorizing thing, man. That's just, I'm glad that he's over with that. The Crown agreed. The Crown said that there's been no breaches for 2 years of his bail, and that there are conditions to manage any remaining risks. We will be back next week on Monday. The defense indicated they still intend to call Sergeant Fong Lee, who was in charge of the PLT unit at the time of the Freedom Convoy. They intend to call another police officer, another police constable. I believe he was present in the body of the court today, Professor Constable Atkin. I'll have to get his name right. And then some civilian witnesses, and I think that's it. There might be someone else, but they intend to call evidence Monday, maybe a bit of Tuesday, closing statements Friday. So that's how it looks. Thanks for watching. Guys, listen, if you like this, please like it. Leave a comment with your thoughts. I want to hear what you're saying. I'm going to think about what you're saying, put it into what I'm thinking, and we'll talk about it. And if you like me and you like what I do, subscribe. And if you're on Twitter, please go on the Twitter threads, like the threads, share them out. Thanks again, guys. Have a great weekend. From Ottawa, I'm your friend, Right Blend. You can call me John.